The Jansen family seemed normal to everyone, caring, close-knit, always ready to support each other. But one day everything changed. Something so terrible happened in that house that even close friends couldn't believe it. Behind the secret lay events that shook the entire family and put the people around them into a complete state of shock. Police, friends, neighbors, everyone tried to understand how this seemingly blameless family could fall apart and what exactly had happened behind the closed doors of their home. The dense forests of British Columbia, the small quiet towns with their brick houses and cozy cafes always seem to have been the backdrop for Randy Jansen's life. Langley, a small town considered by many to be a peaceful refuge, had been Randy's home since childhood. But behind this peaceful image lay difficult, stressful years full of work and dreams that did not always lead to happiness. Randy was very close to his father, who worked in a sawmill from an early age. His father became his most important mentor, teaching him everything about working with wood. When Randy graduated from high school, he decided to follow in his father's footsteps and got a job at the same sawmill. The work was physically demanding, requiring a lot of hard work and long shifts. But that was not unusual for Randy. He had been used to it since childhood. For many residents of Langley, working in the sawmill was an integral part of life, and Randy was no exception. For more than 10 years, he processed wood and hauled logs, finding his place in this routine. Despite the difficulty and monotony, the work gave him stability and a sense of fulfillment. Each day was not much different from the previous one, but for Randy, this was his way of life and his sense of belonging. The sawmill was a way for Randy to provide for his family, but he found even more joy and inspiration in music. It had accompanied him since childhood, and playing the guitar and singing eventually became an important part of his life. At the local bar in Langley, Randy often performed for the residents who came there to listen to live music and relax after work. On stage, he was transformed. Instead of a quiet and balanced man, the audience saw a charismatic artist completely immersed in music. His sincere performances were loved by the locals, and their support gave Randy a sense of importance and joy. It was in this bar that Randy once met Laurel, the woman who would soon change his life. Laurel was 6 years older, worked as a bartender, and often watched him perform. She was confident and friendly, and customers loved her for her ability to create a warm atmosphere. Initially, Randy and Laurel only talked about music, about life, but soon their topics became much deeper. They shared a common love for music and similar dreams. Laurel played the piano, and although her life had taken a different path, she always wanted to seriously pursue music. Their shared interests and mutual attraction quickly turned into something more. Work at the sawmill continued as usual, but now Laurel was in Randy's life. Their relationship became serious, and they began to make plans for the future. They felt that the town had become too small for them and dreamed of more, a life where music was not just a hobby but a central part of their shared journey. Workdays at the sawmill, performances in bars, and evenings with Laurel gave Randy's life new meaning. He had finally found what he was looking for: love, inspiration, and the desire to keep going. Randy and Laurel often thought back to the day they married in 1990. The ceremony was modest, with only the closest friends and family present, creating a cozy atmosphere. Randy sang a song for Laurel, and that was the beginning of their life together, full of love and hope. A few years after the wedding, they had their daughter Emily, and with her birth, their lives changed completely. Randy was always proud that his daughter was the best in the world, and his love for her was obvious to everyone who knew the family. When Emily turned 8, her life changed dramatically. She suffered from severe headaches that were so agonizing that she could no longer participate in music lessons. From a young age, Emily showed a talent for singing, which delighted her parents. She attended a vocal studio, won competitions, and dreamed of becoming a singer. Seeing her success, her parents did everything to support her dreams. When problems arose, Randy and Laurel couldn't understand what was happening to their daughter. Referrals to doctors and numerous tests yielded no clear answer, and they remained in the dark about her condition. Due to the severe pain, Emily had to leave school and be homeschooled as bright light and noise in the classroom triggered further attacks. Her room was always darkened, and her parents took turns caring for her, trying to alleviate her suffering. After many examinations, doctors diagnosed her with migraines. This was a severe blow to the entire family. The prescribed medications helped a little to relieve the pain but could not completely eliminate the attacks. Music, which Emily loved so much and which brought her joy, became inaccessible. Emily, who used to be cheerful and active, now withdrew more and more, spending time in silence and darkness. Randy and Laurel desperately tried to help their daughter. They tried many treatments, consulted various specialists, and looked for alternative approaches, but nothing brought the hoped-for relief. The doctor's prognosis offered little hope. Migraines are often incurable, and many people have to live with them for life. Statistics show that about 53% of migraine patients can no longer drive due to attacks. 30% have learning difficulties, and 34% have difficulty finding employment. Emily's situation was typical from a medical point of view, but this did not change her parents' fear as they watched their daughter fade away. These years were particularly difficult for Randy. Music, which used to bring him comfort, now reminded him that his daughter could no longer do what she loved. The evenings he spent playing guitar now seemed empty without Emily's voice. He no longer enjoyed performing at the local bar and began to stay home more often to support his daughter in difficult times and be there for her. When Emily began to suffer, Randy and Laurel felt completely powerless. Their cheerful and energetic daughter, who used to be full of enthusiasm, now spent most of her time in her room, avoiding light and noise. Randy continued to work, but his thoughts constantly returned to Emily, and every morning he hoped that he would find a way to alleviate her pain. By the age of 18, Emily's condition had worsened even further. Migraine attacks became more frequent and intense. Sometimes the pain lasted for days, preventing her from studying and meeting friends. Nevertheless, Emily did not give up her goals and enrolled at the University of British Columbia in the Faculty of Arts. She chose art because she dreamed of a career as an opera singer and hoped that her studies would help her get closer to that dream. For her, studying was not only a way to expand her knowledge, but also a chance to return to her normal life. Physical exhaustion and constant attacks made every day a real challenge for Emily. She tried to stay active, took singing lessons, studied music theory, art history, and literature. Despite her difficulties, Emily even participated in student activities and concerts. Her fellow students noticed her desire to actively participate in university life, even though it was difficult for her. But behind this activity was a constant battle with pain. Emily often missed classes and then caught up on her own. Due to the strong medications she took to combat her migraines, Emily constantly felt lethargic, sleepy, and weak. To relieve her symptoms, she was prescribed triptans, anticonvulsants, and antidepressants. The side effects of these medications were significant: depression, concentration problems, and physical deterioration. Over time, Emily tried to forego the medications to reduce their negative effects on her body and sought alternative methods to alleviate her suffering. She began to meditate, do breathing exercises, place cold compresses on her head, and avoid triggers like bright light, strong odors, and loud noises. The room became her sanctuary, where she could hide from everything that exacerbated her pain. When the pain became unbearable, Emily stayed in the darkened room, avoiding light and noise, while her parents Randy and Laurel took turns caring for her and trying to do something to alleviate her suffering. Despite the hardships, Emily tried to continue her life as before. She continued to meet with her friends, even though the meetings became less frequent due to her health. Sometimes she had to cancel plans at the last minute because of a sudden attack, but her friends never left her alone. They came to her house, spent time with her, and tried to support her so that she wouldn't feel lonely. Emily recognized the limitations her illness brought, but she didn't want to give up what was important to her. Her desire to return to a normal life and continue making music remained constant despite the challenges. On May 7, 2015, Randy Jansen posted something on Facebook that shocked everyone who knew him. In this post, he admitted that in the last 10 days he had committed acts that were unjustifiable. First, he described his daughter Emily, calling her the best daughter ever. Gifted, intelligent, and kind. He recalled how she filled their house with laughter and was always there for them, even when she herself was suffering. But her illness took many opportunities from her and forced her to give up her dreams. Emily had suffered from migraines since childhood. The constant pain led to depression, and days of uninterrupted pain became her reality. Randy described how Emily looked at her classmates who lived normal lives while she spent time in the hospital or sat in the darkness of her room. Despite all this, she never stopped hoping for the best and dreaming of the future, but her condition remained unchanged. Randy often told his friends that Emily was the meaning of his life and that he could not live if she were no longer there. His helplessness, seeing his daughter suffer, and his inability to change anything drove him to despair. He shared his worries with his friends, and everyone understood how difficult it was for him. At some point, Randy made a decision that changed everything. In his posting, he revealed that he took a weapon and shot his daughter to free her from her misery. He described the moment he imagined Emily free of pain, like an angel floating above the clouds. Then he shot his wife Laurel because he didn't want her to live with the grief of losing their daughter. A few days later, he killed his sister Shelley so she wouldn't have to be ashamed of his deed. Randy wrote about how Emily tried to heal in every possible way. She was strong, but the illness took hold of her. He could no longer bear to watch her suffer and felt completely powerless every day because he knew there was nothing he could do to help. Randy often told his friends that he would do anything for his daughter and finally did what he considered the only way out. After these events, it became clear how deep his despair was. When Randy Jansen published his Facebook post, several friends and acquaintances immediately contacted the police. They were disturbed by what they read and wanted to make sure Randy's family was okay. The content of the post was shocking, and many could not believe what had happened. After numerous calls, including one from Brian Jones, the police quickly sent a patrol to Randy's house. Brian Jones, one of Randy's closest friends, experienced fear and confusion after reading the message. At first, he hoped it was a mistake or a bad joke, but when he saw the caption with the nickname Randy had used since high school, he realized that the words really belonged to his friend. Brian recognized the seriousness of the situation and immediately took action. He excused himself from work and drove to Shelley's house. While he tried to call Randy, all calls went unanswered, which only increased his apprehension. When Brian stopped in front of Shelley's house, he noticed a stack of unopened newspapers on the porch. It struck him as strange, as Shelley was always responsible and never left her tasks undone. Her old delivery van was parked in front of the house, and the curtains on the windows were tightly drawn. There was no sign of life. Brian knocked on the door several times, but no one opened. The entire area felt strange and unsettling. After the death of her parents, Shelley had led a secluded life. She lived alone, had no children, and rarely had contact with neighbors. Her main occupation was delivering newspapers, and she was always punctual with this work. The undelivered newspapers immediately alarmed Brian. He felt that something serious had happened and decided to call the police. The officer on duty informed him that Brian was not the first to report such a thing and that a patrol had already been dispatched to investigate the case. At the end of his post, Randy wrote that his family was now in heaven and no longer in pain. He expressed his regret, took full responsibility, and apologized to everyone he might have hurt. The post ended with the words, "Rest in peace, my little family." When Brian read this, he suffered a deep shock. He had always known Randy as a kind man who would not want to do evil and could not believe that the man even owned a weapon. He remembered the love with which Randy spoke of his family and could not understand how his friend had dared to do such a thing. The police initially tried to contact Randy Jansen, who was inside his house. He was seen through a first-floor window with a shotgun in his hands. Officers used loudspeakers to try and reach him, but Randy did not respond. The officers realized that the situation was extremely tense and that they had to proceed cautiously so as not to provoke him to further aggressive actions. The house was cordoned off and negotiations began, but Randy showed no signs of cooperation. A few hours later, the confrontation escalated into something more dangerous. Randy set the house on fire, and police officers noticed smoke rising from the top floor. An attempt to break in was unsuccessful. The fire spread too quickly and blocked access. Officers saw a body wrapped in a sheet on the ground floor but could not get close enough to identify it. Within minutes, the flames engulfed the entire house and the officers had to retreat. When firefighters arrived at the scene, the building was already fully engulfed in flames and beyond saving. The flames raged so fiercely that access to the building was impossible even days after the fire was extinguished. It was not until May, 3 days after the fire, that investigators were able to enter the building and begin their examination. 3 bodies were found in the burned remains of the house. 19-year-old Emily was found in her room, her body wrapped in a sheet. 5-year-old Laurel lay in the kitchen, also wrapped in a blanket. Investigators determined that both had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had been murdered 10 days before Randy's Facebook post. Randy's own body was found in a second-floor bedroom. He had shot himself before setting the house on fire. Judging by the remains of the weapon and the position of the body, he was in a deep emotional crisis and had decided to voluntarily end his life. When police arrived at the house of Shelley, Randy's sister, they found her body in the living room. Shelley had been shot twice in the head, and her body was also covered with a blanket. The medical examiner determined that Shelley had been dead for 2 days before she was discovered. There were no signs of a struggle at the crime scene, suggesting that Randy had surprised her. Emily's condition had deteriorated so much that doctors began giving her morphine injections in the last year to relieve her unbearable pain. These injections were a last resort, and neighbors often saw her parents bringing her home from the hospital. Emily was so weak that her parents supported her to walk home. These were difficult moments for everyone who knew the family. Randy Jansen, Emily's father, always tried to take care of his family despite all the difficulties. A year before the tragedy, he went to his family doctor because of insomnia and constant stress. He told the doctor about his worries and how difficult it was to see his daughter suffer. The doctor suggested tranquilizers and advised rest, but Randy refused the medication, believing it would not solve the problem. Brian Jones, a friend of Randy's, recalled that he never spoke of having bad thoughts or wanting to harm anyone. He described him as a quiet and hardworking person who was always ready to help. For Randy, his family always came first, and no one could imagine that he was capable of such acts. Brian noted, however, that Randy had reached his breaking point. He could no longer bear to see his daughter suffer and finally made a terrible decision. Many neighbors who had known Randy since childhood could not believe what had happened. They said that such acts were not like Randy, who had always been a friendly and calm person, never showing aggression or cruelty. Everything that happened seemed to be the result of despair and the inability to cope with the pain and suffering of his family. A neighbor remembered Randy saying that if his daughter left him, he would have nothing left to live for. Despite these words, Randy lived in a house with the bodies of his wife and daughter for 10 days before voluntarily ending his life. Emily's last tweet came 4 days before the tragedy. "I complain about the pain, but at least I'm here to feel it. And I thank God I'm alive." This post showed her desire to live despite the suffering she experienced. Her messages always reflected the struggle for life. Despite her illness, she tried to maintain a positive attitude even when the situation seemed hopeless. Emily was a kind young woman who always tried to stay in touch with the world around her. She loved music and sang in the local church when her health permitted, and many people in Langley remembered her performances. However, as her condition worsened, she was seen less and less in church. Nevertheless, she remained attentive to her neighbors, cooked with her mother and shared treats with them, and helped the neighborhood children with their lessons when she felt better. Laurel, Emily's mother, did her best to support her daughter. In one of her Twitter posts, she wrote, "Emily is back in the hospital. I pray to God that she gets help. I feel helpless." These words express the pain and despair she felt seeing her daughter suffer. Laurel was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but she did not give up and continued to look for ways to alleviate Emily's condition. Shelley, Randy's sister, also could not foresee the tragedy that would occur. No one in the family had expected their fate to be decided in this way. In the past year, Randy had often complained to friends that he could not cope with the workload and stress from his daughter's illness. No one could imagine that Randy would ever get into such an emotional state that he would decide to kill his family. As I said before, Emily maintained a Twitter account where she shared her thoughts. Her post showed that she did not want to give up. Shortly before the tragedy, she also wrote, "For the first time in 2 years, I am pain-free for 12 hours. I am so tired of the pain, but I have to keep going." It was her determination to fight despite all odds. Randy could not handle the emotional burden. Laurel also suffered as she watched her daughter fade, and her Twitter posts reflected her pain. Despite their despair, the whole family tried to support each other, but the situation got worse and worse, and none of them could foresee where it would lead. Now that everything has come to light, one can see how despair, hidden suffering, and feelings of hopelessness led to a tragedy that no one expected. The story of the Jansen family is a reminder that even behind the strongest walls, horrors can lurk that will one day find their way out. If you liked the video, feel free to give it a like. That helps a lot with distribution. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for watching and take care.